In an earlier post I talked about paddock clearing, and the area that was being cleared in that post is the area just over here where you can see this gate down the end here with all the cattle standing on the other side. Now the reason that I was so keen on getting the cattle over into that paddock was that the two sacrificial paddocks I mentioned during that post really needed a rejuvenate, and those two sacrificial paddocks are actually here at the front. You can see I've been doing a little bit of work over the weekend. So these are the two sacrificial paddocks. We have one paddock here which sort of runs up across the back, down the centre, and then back up along the road here. And then there's another one on the other side over there, you can just sort of see over there. Basically they're about 0.2 of an acre each, and the soil here was very lightly covered with vegetation. In fact, I would say that it was extraordinarily patchy, and there were very large swathes, probably in the vicinity of about 6 or 8 meters in diameter, that just were hard pan and had absolutely no growth at all. So that's why these areas were chosen to be the sacrificial paddock. The other reason is because the any water that did flow over the top of these paddocks could be collected along these edges here, so it didn't the high nutrient levels wasn't likely to cause other problems further along the property. But anyway, the cattle have been out of this paddock now for about a week and a half, and you can see that the growth we have had has been remarkable. Now I did oversow this paddock several weeks back. It's actually when I wanted to put it into fallow, but then I had to bring Delilah and Friedrich into this paddock. But what I did was I covered the soil with some straw. In this case, most of this is oaten hay. There's a bit of pasture grass here, but we'll come back to that in a second. And then I broadcast my seed into that straw. Now the advice I had from the rural outlets was, it's not going to work, forget it, you're going to get a very, very, very poor germination rate, you're basically wasting your time and your money. But quite the contrary, I think we've done very, very well. As you can see, there's a beautiful patch of green right across this paddock. Most of the species that we can see coming up are in fact this fellow, which is Winifred brassica, which is a sort of forage brassica, but there's also a fair amount of grass coming through as well, which is the remnant grass, plus whatever's come in with the various hay. Now we've actually got more grass in this section than we do in most other areas, and I think the reason is this different sort of hay. This is actually pasture grass that was mostly phalaris, that came from a local property, and there's a big bale here. It's actually what the cattle have in their paddock at the moment, and it's a big bale. It was brought in as cattle food, but whatever the cattle wasted, I didn't waste. So when the cattle ate the food, they ate probably about 2/3 of the bale, and about 1/3 of the bale gets spread out, trampled down, urinated on, etc, etc, etc. So when we bring them in some new food, I would scatter this hay around. As you can see, the bale was placed just there, and you can see where it's been scattered around just with a metal rake. Terrific exercise for me. And what it does is that then becomes makes like a mulch on the paddock. And as you can see, the fertility inside of this really is phenomenal, and nothing exemplifies that more than just the growth of these little toadstools or mushrooms. These come up every morning, and probably by about 9:30, 10 o'clock they're gone, because the sun knocks them over and they just die down to nothingness. But to me, that mushroom growth indicates that this pasture hay is rapidly being broken down, and will add back to the soil. And I think that most of this grass that's coming in is probably seed that was bundled with the actual grass. So I think that'll be really good, because this is good pasture, and some of that seed coming up, or some of that grass coming up, does look like phalaris. So it'll be interesting to see just how it comes along. The reason I put the pasture grass here, because I suspected that it may have some localized seed in it, as opposed to the oaten hay, which comes from much further away. The reason I put the pasture grass in this spot was this was actually one of the big patches that I mentioned that had absolutely zero plant growth on it before the cattle came in. But anyway, the whole point of this exercise is to show you just how effective. Oh, I did forget one thing, and that is that these sprinklers you can see here, these are wobblers, which are a low pressure sprinkler. You may think, oh well, of course you got all this growth, he's irrigating it. Actually, I haven't connected these yet. I've laid out the pipe and I put the sprinklers on. I did that last weekend. This weekend I was supposed to go through and connect the whole lot up to a pump, but unfortunately it rained all weekend, so I didn't really get the opportunity to get out here and do this. I focused on other activities. So this pasture area, or this growth, is what came on after a week of no rain. The only rain we had about 6 weeks, four to 5 weeks without any rain at all, and then just on the weekend past we got about 5 mils of rain. So almost all of this growth was growth without any additional water, although it will come along once I get the sprinklers going. The whole point of this video is just to show you how these paddocks are coming along and how these sacrificial paddocks are being regreened. Personally, I think that this paddock and the one over the back there, which I sowed with plantain and clover over the weekend, and hopefully the birds won't eat all of it. I'll get some of it come up as growth. I think these two will actually become very important paddocks to the feed strategy here at this sustainable house. The long-term plan, if these paddocks do come up and are that significant as a feed source, which I think they will be, then the plan is to build another small quarantine holding paddock over there. The cattle yards will come over here, and then I'm going to set laneways up between the paddocks over there. There was another half-acre paddock going in the next few weeks. Down here between these two paddocks, and also up in the corner there, it's quite steep, but there's another paddock fenced off to allow the cattle to get up there and just trim that grass for me. They wouldn't want to stay up there for too long. You certainly don't want them to denude it, but the concept is I'll get them in there just to trim it up, and then I'll bring them back out. The idea being is that what we'll do is, if we have these two paddocks sown into something like forage brassica, or maybe even in autumn we can go lucerne, what we can do is you can actually walk the cattle in, put them on the paddock just for an hour or two to graze it, and then move them off. That's a really good strategy with the forage brassica, because it can cause some problems with cattle if they're put on it permanently, and also because the cattle are currently on what is fairly sparse grass around the property, fairly dry, very high in roughage, also on lots of purchased hay, so very dry sort of roughage type stuff. Bring them onto really lush ground like this, when it grows up a bit, has a risk of causing bloat. So if we bring them on for an hour, let them fill themselves, and then move them off, bloat's a much lower risk. That's especially the case if we can actually give them something to eat first. So, but anyway, look, really, this is a real success for me. I think it's coming along really well. The trick will now be to keep the water up to it, so if we have some dry spells, I'll get these sprinklers going, which will just, the idea is to give the plants a bit of growth, and then what I'll do is I will start to taper the water off, so they become more and more reliant on the water sources that are in the soil. The forage brassica is known to have quite a deep root, so it should survive the summer quite well in here. The only other thing in this paddock that is worthy of mention is this swale here, but I'll come back and talk about the swaling in these paddocks sometime in the next few weeks.